It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
All right, welcome back. This is episode number 8 of Beneath the Helmet podcast show. Today I got a very special friend, colleague, a mentor to myself through the fire service, retired Fire Chief Tom DeSorcy. Chief DeSorcy and myself have known each other for over a decade, definitely being a mentor for me through the fire service. We traveled Canada, the US together, different fire expos and conferences. We were on the conference committee for our BC local fire chiefs for a long time, bringing in amazing speakers from around the world. So that was quite the partnership we had. And today we get a chance to hear his story from back into his radio days to where he became the first fire chief in his hometown community of Hope, BC, and how that process went of amalgamating 3 organizations into one, becoming the first paid fire chief. But also we're going to talk about how his transition from being the fire chief to being retired. So I think that's a great topic for people to get some nuggets from and some wisdom for when they have to finally hang that coat up from the fire service that they love so much. So I hope you enjoy the show, episode number 8 with Fire Chief Tom DeSorcy. This podcast is also sponsored by Silver Arrow Coaching and Consulting, helping high-performing leaders from around the world prevent burnout, recover from burnout, and become more resilient. To find out more, visit www.silverarrowco.com. Until next time, stay well and enjoy the show. All right. Welcome, retired Fire Chief Tom DeSorcy. Congratulations on your recent retirement. That's quite the accomplishment.
Thanks. Sounds different when you say it. But yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's a great experience so far, I must admit.
Congratulations. So for those who don't know retired Fire Chief Tom DeSorcy, tell us a bit about your history. Where'd you come from? What brought you to where you are now?
It's a long story, and it seems like a long story. From the beginning, it all started in a 1,000-watt radio station in small town Hope, BC, and that's basically where it came from. Born and raised in Hope, small town, British Columbia, about 6,500 people. Then it was 3,500 people. We are located, 2 hours east of Vancouver, so we're not big city. We are small outside the Lower Mainland. But yeah, grew up in a small town and wanted to be either a bartender or a radio announcer. That was my goals going through school. I think it was when we did a thing in grade 12, a bunch of my buddies and we had this idea that we were going to record everybody on videotape in our grad class and see where they wanted to be in 10 years. So I wanted to work in Vancouver radio. I wanted to work at CFUN, was the big station then on the AM dial. And I wanted to be a rock jock. That or a bartender. I don't know where how that happened, but that's what I wanted to do. And so clearly I was part of the entertainment side, part of the acting side, part of the getting out there and being out there, if you will. But then the big break came in high school in grade 12. I started off by taking a correspondence course in my grade 12 year with the Columbia School of Broadcasting. I wanted to get my diploma in broadcast and went through it correspondence, and I had to go and do some practical stuff eventually, but it turned out that I got hired at the local radio station. I was doing a high school news report. There was something that we did all the time. The students would come in and do a weekly report, an update on the news of the day of the school. And I was picked to do it once. And then once the cat's fed, they know where the food is. And I kept doing it. And they didn't have to operate or have somebody produce it. I was doing my own and in the studio. And before you know it, when it came time to do my practical work in Vancouver with the school, it was like, I can send you a tape. I'm doing a show now. And I was actually doing middays on the weekends. And it turned out that right out of grade 12, I was going to be working for the radio station. So, other odd jobs and such, but got into radio. And we're talking graduating in 1980, eventually getting on the air full time with the radio station a year later or so. And all the while joined the local fire department. I had that other urge somehow. I don't know where it came from, but I guess maybe my dad was a volunteer firefighter. And of course was a fireman then, as it was referred to. And he was a firefighter in a volunteer department that was a small town, typical department. that really didn't do a lot. We didn't go to a lot of fires. That's all we did. If we did anything was go to a fire. Certainly didn't do what's being done today, the medical side, the hazmat, the whatever natural disaster that comes around. It was just, you got a fire, we went to a fire. The days of no alarms, the days of those kind of things weren't around, and we just went to fires. And so we had a fire siren in town. And I joined after the siren because I knew I was always part of that fire department when my dad was involved, that I'd always hear the siren go off. The kind of event where the whole town knew there was a fire or there was an incident. And I got involved in that on a pager. So the alarms were, the siren was gone. But yeah, all through my radio days in Hope, I was on a pager and running around with the local volunteer fire department. I was the social convener. I think that was my role in the department, because
probably still to today, right?
Probably, yeah, still. I still have that organizing bug, that organizing, getting involved in different things. But that was the thing. Again, it just shows the difference in the fire service from what it was back then to where it is now in terms of the smaller departments, et cetera. And I guess maybe a large part of the big departments, but that's the story how I got into fire. There was stuff in between time. I was in Vancouver in radio. I had a chance to go and work in Vancouver. You know my story, but certainly for those that don't, I was a liquor salesman for a few years, wine and spirits rep
sort of a bartender.
Sort of a bartender. Yeah, exactly. I was involved in mixology at the beginning form, if you will, where we had the product that we represented to the end user. And whenever you tell the story, or I get a chance to tell the story about learning about wines and taking courses, where I ended up, and we're talking 1989, where we ended up on this course. We had to take a course on wines, introduction, not a sommelier. We're learning about wines, how they're made, where they're from, the different finer things about wines, and not only our products, wines in general. But the practical part of that, after we did the training, was in France and Germany. So they took us to France and to Bordeaux and to some of the wine regions and into Germany for tastings and appreciation. 1989, that was a long time ago. I was a youngster, and I would fish out of water for a while. But when you think back on history, that weekend we were there in 1989 was the weekend the wall came down in Berlin.
Wow. Yeah, that's historic.
And we crossed the border and had no idea until we opened up a newspaper going over and said, this is pretty significant what we're getting into over here. And we didn't get to Berlin, but when you look back in time, you go, that weekend in 1989 in Thanksgiving weekend, I think here in Canada, but whatever it was in October, that was, and you go, wow. That was cool. But so in the nutshell, did the mixology thing, did the DJ thing. Where the firefighter thing came in, again, started in 83 with the fire department. We had 3 fire departments in the Hope area because Hope was the small town, and then they had 2 outlying areas. And I had moved away to Vancouver, came back, leaving there to come back home again and get back involved with the radio station as a manager this time. Lived in one of the outside areas. I joined the fire department in that area and transitioned into that department. And that was when the amalgamation happened. And the District of Hope was formed out of the town of Hope and the outlying areas that were brought into one municipality. And they had 3 fire departments in one town. And it didn't take too long before someone had realized that's really not the way to operate. We can't have 3 fire departments, 3 fire chiefs, 3 halls that are very close together. We need to put this together. And that was in 1998, 99. And they put out a posting, said, hey, does anyone want to be the interim fire chief? And I said, I'll put my name in. You never know. It'd be fun to do for 10 months, all the while doing the radio thing. And the rest is history, as they say, because that 10 months, I realized to myself that it just can't be 10 months. Something's got to give here. Something's got to be more permanent. Once you hire this position, it's got to maintain. And I pushed for it. What's the line I use? Put myself in a position to accept a job if it became available. And that was when I started fire officer and all those kind of things on the side and trying to get into it. And before you know it, we were pushing for a job for me, that ended up becoming a full-time job when I left the radio station locally, and the conglomerate company came along, a large one in Canada, and bought out the small town radio station. And the writing was on the wall. I knew that the future was going to be something different. So became the fire chief out of nowhere. Here's a volunteer firefighter. And one of the guys that was part of the other members and just a team player. And we elected a fire chief every year, right? We had an annual meeting, and whoever was turn was to be the fire chief was the fire chief. And all of a sudden I'm coming out of nowhere and I'm now the fire chief. Seriously? And that's where it began. And before you know it, I'm in charge. And that was, when did I start? 2000. I was hired full time. So
Wow.
That's a while ago.
That's quite the journey.
And when you start to think about it, yeah, I guess it is. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you and I have talked before. We've known each other for many years, and it was a challenge, a trying moment of the career. And I haven't used that term for a while. It took me a while to use career because that wasn't the intent. I was just all of a sudden, okay, I'm going to be the fire chief. Wow. Is there something that I felt bad? I felt out of place. Felt like I didn't earn it. I didn't go up the ranks like you should. Isn't there a rule? That's what I was saying in 2000 and 1998, 99. Isn't there a way to do this? You don't just all of a sudden go, bang, you're the fire chief and you're going to be that for the next 24 years.
Did you feel you were personally ready to become a fire chief at that time?
I didn't. Yeah, I was. I felt I was, but I felt uncomfortable in terms of the fact that I didn't believe it. Right. I had friends in the business that I got to know that you'd call chief on a regular basis. And when people called me that, I was taken aback. I went to the school, the Justice Institute here in British Columbia, did training and did my courses. I was the only volunteer firefighter in Fire Officer 1. And the rest were all career people that were moving up in the ranks of their departments in the Lower Mainland. That was the catalyst that kicked it off. Those people that I hung out with for 16 weeks, every week, and sometimes twice a week, sort of gave me the feel of what it was like to be, looking back now, to be in a fire hall, to be part of that crew and that team, because we got together all the time. They were looking out for me, even during the live fire trainings. They were showing me stuff and taking me in and taking care of me and all that kind of stuff. So that was the neat part about it. But then I gradually felt more and more ready. What was the real kicker, the pressure moment, was when they were pushing the volunteer fire chiefs of the time, because we took all the volunteer fire chiefs, again, they still had fire chiefs that were in charge of their halls, created a different position and called them district chiefs. We didn't know what else to call them. We just looked it up in a book kind of thing. We were brand new. We didn't have uniforms. We had different crests. So that we just didn't have that solidity, if you will, of being a fire department, being three together that had three different training things, three different ideas, and we're all 4 or 5 kilometers apart. It really didn't make a lot of sense at the time. And so it was moving into that full-time position meant that the fire chiefs, because there was a committee that ran the fire department, and you know what that's like when you have a group of people running a fire department, whereas that's their only job is. And these elected officials were in charge of the committee that ran the fire department and gave direction to the 3 fire chiefs. Well, the 3 fire chiefs went to that committee, and most of it was makeup of the district council, and said to them, you need to make this a permanent position. The person is going to leave a job to come to this job. It can't be a part-time position. They didn't believe it was a full-time job. This is what we were battling way back 20 some years ago, in the fact that it can't be a full-time job. It was a volunteer position. What are you going to do all day? We can't have a full-time fire chief, especially you, because you don't know what you're doing. You're not a firefighter. You're a radio announcer. You're a guy that was a DJ doing a morning show. And we can't believe that you're a firefighter. Like, seriously? And it's, what about the rest of the volunteer firefighters? Do you care what they do for a living? Do you care that there's a school teacher and a store manager and a doctor that's on the team? Does that matter to you? No, but they're volunteers. That kind of attitude was there.
Yep.
And so
they're probably still there in a lot of communities, unfortunately.
In a lot of cases, it probably still is. Exactly. And so when they walked into council one day and said, we got to get this done. We got to get this position hired. We can't do it on our own. The work that needs to be done is not getting done. And we need to have a full-time position, be responsible from a manager's standpoint for the fire department. It's not about going to every call and being in charge at every call, but it's about managing the department. And they said, no, we can't do it. We can't do it. It's too small a town. I was in that room, and the three older members, the chiefs, took their pagers off and put them on the desk, said to the mayor at the time that you get this done or we're done. You're now the fire department tonight. And the council looked at them, and I looked at them with fear in my eyes and thinking, what have I got myself into? What's the term? It got real.
Right. Yeah.
Real fast.
Yep.
And they said, you can't quit. They said, we're volunteers. Watch us. And that was where the fight started, where they had to create a full-time position, which included bylaw and services, bylaw enforcement, the dog catcher, and try to run and manage a fire department beyond that 10-month amalgamation, because that was the contract. Get it organized. But once you got it organized, who's going to keep it on the rails? Mm-hmm. And so that was my role.
So what you know now, if you could turn back time and you had control over this amalgamation, anything you'd do different, or any nuggets that you could pass on to the listeners on how to go through that process? Because it's probably extremely stressful and time consuming and political.
Yeah, I think if you could turn back time, you would say that if the same people are involved, that maybe taking that extra step of being more respected in terms of your knowledge of the fire service, that I was that campy, fun guy that was because you're the local radio guy. You're just out there having fun. You're doing things. You're taking part in fundraisers. You're publicly on display all the time. You're always on. But that's maybe what hurts you when you come by and say, we have to be serious. And how can you know all this stuff? How do you know? Yeah, but I don't know all of it. I have to learn it. And it's unfortunate that back then, maybe I would have got the training, and maybe I would have moved on to other departments. Maybe I would have moved into a different opportunity for more money. But yeah, it's hard to say. I always felt that there was unfinished business. And fast forward to 2022, even 2021, when I felt that business was nearing completion.
So we're both hometown fire chiefs. What's your thoughts on being a hometown fire chief?
The honor and the pride has not left me in terms of, and that's kind of private stuff that people, you don't talk about too much. It's out there in the fire world, but at the end of the day, you'll never know what it's like growing up in a small town and then to be the fire chief in the small town. The fire chief in our department was a person that held the position for quite some time, whereas the other outlying departments were elected on a semi-regular basis. But it was all different. But yeah, the opportunity that I thought was not necessarily for the career of going somewhere else, but it was, wow, let's see how long this goes for. Let's see if this can be the case, where I was told by folks like that I've met along the time over the years, and mentors that I worked with, that said, this is unique, that you're going to be the chief full time. And technically the first paid fire chief in your community, if you last. And it almost didn't. At the end of the day, in the very beginning, it was a challenge. The public criticism, the one big fire that would come up once in a while, that you would look like, boy, it didn't, we didn't stop the fire. The public expects us to show up and the fire goes away. But when you start to learn and get taught about control and about acceptable loss and such, that you're not heroes, that you want to make sure that you get everyone home safely and you protect what's burnt is lost, and what's not burnt is what we're trying to protect. And so you're educating the public around that. So at the end of the day, I think it hasn't left me and hasn't never escaped me that, you look back on that and go, well, that was cool. And the sad part of it is the fact that my parents never saw that. And my story, and my dad, I lost my dad I turned 30. So it was 31 years ago. And I was a radio guy. The last person that he knew of me, the last image he had of me, was listening to me on a night show in his hospital bed in Vancouver. And I would stop by, and I'd be going in to do a night shift on our satellite radio network across Canada. And it was a program, and it was a country music program. And my dad was a country music fan. So it was neat that I knew he was listening. I knew that's one thing I learned in radio that we've talked about before, is that there's only one listener. It's the person that's listening to you right now. Yeah, there's more and more of them, but it's that one person that you're communicating with. And so I knew that I had one listener every night that I was on. That was my dad in the hospital bed.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty
in
nice.
Vancouver Hospital. So he never saw that. He was a volunteer fire guy. The part that I regret, if anything, was the fact that he never saw what I became. And the fact that when you create a uniform that we never had, they did have tunics back in the day. I have his old tunic, and they just had it as a uniform to wear out on the dance. I think that's what they did. They went to the annual dance, but they didn't have uniform shirts under there. They didn't have anything else that they would wear along with it. but yeah, for me to be able to, that I wanted to show him that I was in uniform and I was a fire chief. My mom she knew at one point later on, but she was gone 15, 16 years later. And for the last 10 years or so, she didn't know who I was with dementia. So at the end of the day, again, I would go in a care home and visit her as a fire chief in uniform, and she just looked at me. So it was tough. And I wish that was different. That would be pretty cool to see them see what happened. And I take a great deal of pride in inviting the older members that are still around the community to come by the halls. We still have the halls. We still have 3 fire halls. In history, looking back, if you did the whole thing different and knew it was going to be an amalgamated department, those areas wouldn't have had fire departments on their own. They would have taken service from a bigger department in Hope, if you will. But that's the way it was back in the day, that your fire trucks didn't leave the community, and they stayed in that little area, and they were paid for by the people, and they didn't move outside that area. So that was the time then. But yeah, I'd love to bring them in and show them what we've done. And it's a proud moment, very proud moment. We always say proud chief. And that's the case when the guys come by and go, do you remember what it was like in the late 70s? Take a look now in the 2000s and see what we've done and where we've come from, in largely the same buildings, but with a completely different set of equipment and people, obviously.
Yeah, I think in the fire service in general, we're lacking that historic kind of archives. We seem to just move ahead and don't respect the fathers and the mothers who fought before us, right? So it's
important. And there's one fire hall, one of our halls, the old departments, if you will, that took pictures of everything. And there's books of albums of photographs that are still in there, which are great. You pull out those archives and you take a look and remember back, and you come into one of the fire halls here, and you see the pictures on the wall of the guys that were there before and the team that we created. And like our crest that we have today, that is created largely out of the old crests, the old logos, was one thing I did. And when I took over, maybe not having the fire experience was a good thing in terms of the history, the tradition of the fire service. I didn't have all that. I had some, but I didn't have all of it. And it's probably helped me along the way because I created tradition. I started things in the fire hall I thought needed to be started for the future. Fun awards, those kind of things that we do annually. Took some things away that we did annually that wouldn't be done anymore, but added other things that needed doing. I think the idea that creating the uniform, that was met with a lot of objection by the outside, by the political people. Having uniforms, this is becoming a big thing now. Why are we doing all of this stuff? Why are we creating all of these different things that we don't need to create? We're making this a bigger deal than it really should be. And that was the whole attitude. Guess what, people? We need to have this. We need to have recognition. We need to have a sense of belonging. We need to have a team feel, and we need to show people who we are when we get together. Having a uniform day to day was a challenge because that's all a waste of money. No, it's not a waste of money. It's obvious key to have identification. You show up at an incident, you show up at some place where you're just the one person getting out of a vehicle that may or may not have lights on the roof, and you get out and you show up and it answers the questions before they get asked.
Yes.
Oh, you're someone important.
But also provides that sense of safety for that person who's going through the worst day of their life. It's a sense of safety seeing that uniform is okay. Somebody's here to help.
The same reason why when you tell people why we have sirens on fire trucks. Sirens on fire trucks are designed to get you to where you want to go and move people out of the way, but they also tell people we're coming. It's that audible signal that my call has been answered. When I phone 911 and I hear sirens coming from a great distance, that help is on the way.
Yep.
And that is that sense of relief and that sense of feeling that says, okay, it's going to get better now. And when you tell people around that, yeah, that's what it's for. I fought to get a vehicle. I was given a vehicle allowance, but having a marked vehicle with a light and siren, oh my goodness. I was one of the first in British Columbia, one of the few that actually got permission from the province to have lights and siren on my private vehicle, and found a way to do that. All of the stuff that I learned goes back to one thing, and it was the connection I developed in the fire service. And that's the one thing that I would never change. I'm glad I met up with people. It was in 2000 at my very first fire conference where I met your former fire chief, Dave Enfield. And the people that I started to meet and get to know were the people that showed me what they did. And you soon saw that there was a bit of a pattern in the way things were done. And if you had a question, you had some kind of a thought process that you needed to talk about, you did so through the Fire Chiefs Association. That was huge. That was the big thing that got me validation, that when someone says, well, where'd you get this idea from? What are we doing this for? I'll tell you why. And yeah, that was huge. That was I'm the biggest proponent for being involved in a fire association of some kind, no matter what level you happen to be at.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Your lessons from your previous career as a radio announcer, bartender / sales, what kind of tools did you bring into the fire service that you think really propelled your leadership style and changed some things in the culture there?
My biggest way from used to do a lot of amateur theater, drama, and radio was theater of the mind, still is. And that's the best part of doing podcasting that I do now, like you're doing. And it's that theater of the mind. It is, people don't know what they're creating, their own image, their own picture of what you're talking about. And it was that from the stage, first off, I've learned a couple of things. And the one is that always leave them wanting more. Walk away from the radio station with people thinking that, wow, I wish that show was still on the air. I wish that you were still, I still get that today. There are people, it's a small town, that people that are still around that remember Tommy D when he was on the radio. And that's something that, yeah, be proud of that. Be proud of what you've accomplished and recognize what you've accomplished. Yeah, I've done that. And it's maybe personal, it may be inside myself, where I say, yeah, I went to Europe and crossed the border into Germany when they were taking the wall down and opening up a country in the world. But go back in your life and start to recognize significance. Recognize what you did, whether it was significant to anyone else but yourself, but recognize what was significant in what you've done. Again, leave them wanting more. Never overstay your welcome, and know when the right time is to step aside and finish and move on to something else, or stop the show and end it. And knowing when to say when is the key. That you have to believe, and you have to believe in, don't be ashamed in going backwards to say, why did I do this? And you go, wow, that's related to this. And you go, yeah, I was right. And it's that little applause that you have for yourself and the pat on the back that you can do yourself. Don't wait for people to go, yeah, way to go, good job, I really think that was the greatest thing you've ever done. Yeah, if only you look in the mirror and tell yourself that's the greatest thing you've ever done, that's enough.
Yeah, it's a good message, because I think a lot of times fire chiefs don't get the recognition they deserve.
No.
So to keep them motivated, to keep them going, it's just one of those things that seldom happens at that level of fire chief. So if you have the ability to do that yourself, give yourself those little high fives and those back pats, I think that is going to be, it's going to help you just move through those transitions and those tough times.
I've said before, and for those that you talk about radio, and I'm glad I did that stuff. I'm glad I took the training, because it's like anything. People say, just go on the radio, it's acting. No, wait a second. You need to, there's a training process. There's a thing that you learn, and you learn from a lot of the old school people in the business, so to speak, that there was, and again, recognizing significance, recognizing history whenever things come around. When you remember when KD Lang sang with Roy Orbison, and I heard an interview, and I'm just digressing a bit, but I heard an interview on the radio a while ago with KD Lang, and she was telling about the history and the anniversary of the release of that song back in the day. I remember when that song was released. All of a sudden it came back to me. And why do I remember it? Because I was the station manager working at the radio station then. I don't think I was the manager. I was working at the station then. And we got a package in the mail, and it had no explanation, but all it had in there was a Kleenex and an onion.
Kleenex and an onion.
What is that? A Kleenex and an onion from a record label. And we go, what is this? And it said, and it was one message in there that soon you'll be crying. And I thought,
either
what
either
is
by
that?
the onion or the.
So then the onion and the Kleenex, and soon you'll be crying. The next day or so came the release of the single with the duet Crying with Katie Lang and Roy Orbison. But that's a significant song. And I remember the moment that I was introduced to that song, and whoever put that package together, I hope they remember that whole promo kit that came out from the record label. And that was the fun part. You always remember the fun times. Yeah. And I go back to the training part of broadcasting, when you can smile when you talk. And then this is a training thing that when people don't see you, like you see us, but if you don't see us and you smile when you talk, it's a different sound. I catch myself quite often on purpose, smiling to myself, thinking back to something. And you know something, if something's bugging you, smile, just smile. No one has to see you. 100%. Just smile. Yep. And at the end of the day, you feel good. It makes other people feel good if you smile to them. You go on a enforcement kind of event. A lot of our job as a fire chief in a smaller community is going to enforcement, going to burning complaints, going to different things by yourself without a whole fire crew. But it's all about your demeanor and how you act and the way you present yourself. That's customer service. At the end of the day, when you can do that for yourself, it's a pretty good tool. And it's something I do when I talk. Of course, if I'm on a phone, not necessarily on Zoom calls, so to speak, but at the end of the day, it does change your demeanor when you're smiling and talking. And if you can do that more often than not, then you start to feel better about yourself. So those are the little tricks that I've picked up along the way, right?
That's a great tip. Yeah, I think it's contagious as well. Laughter, smiling is contagious, but it's pretty hard to be angry or sad or mad when you're smiling, right? So.
And you go back over time, and going back to original question you asked about changing things different. At the end of the day, you could do a lot of things, and you could waste a lot of time and really eat yourself up inside by saying, I should have done this different. I should have done this different. But at the end of the day, if you did one thing different, it would have to be a long time ago, and that would change everything else that happened along the way. And I don't know that I'd want that. Things happen for a reason, and everything that I did or didn't do was done for a reason to get me to this conversation with you today.
Yeah, no, I'm totally glad you said that, because I think that's true, that where we are today is brought to us because of everything that happened in our past. And if it's good or bad, some of those bad things were our best lessons, right? And it brought us to where we are today. So I agree 100%.
Totally. And the things that we've done, you and I have done some stuff and gone through a lot, and a lot of waters come under our bridges, so to speak, over time. And you start to go back and remember those things. That's the best thing you got. And I go back to my parents, where my mom, for example, spent a life creating memories, and they were gone. They were taken away from her, unfortunately. But it was that time that you had, where she had, and the times that we had around our house that I remember with her friends. I find it entertaining now. I'm older now than my dad ever got to be, which is unique and significant. But when I think back to those people that they were hanging out at our house visiting, and the functions we would have and those kind of social gatherings, I don't know how old those people were. They always seemed old to me. But when I guess reality sets in, you go, wow, they were in their 30s. And you think they were kids.
Now you're the old one, right?
Now I'm the old one. That's the different part. But yes. You have to celebrate. You have to recognize, you have to celebrate, and you have to celebrate with yourself. And because at the end of the day, you can't wait for anyone else to do it for you, and feel comfortable where we're in a position, all of us are in a position to make change in someone's life. And let's make sure we make it good. Let's make sure that, because what's the motto? Your worst day is our every day. Every time you interact with somebody, you really have a choice to change their life for the good or not. And I choose for the good in some way, shape, or form, that I'm going to try and do that. Life is short, and you got to live it to the fullest and do what you can do. Certainly not recklessly, but at the end of the day, you go back and remind yourself what you did. Remind yourself that, hey, remember when we used to cook lamb and roast beef on Salt Spring Island at training weekends? Did we impact those people that took the training? Yeah, I think we did. We did 100%. Impact people that took training, not only in my department, but in the departments that visited. And when you can talk about that and say, yeah, I remember those days when we used to host those events, and That's what they were, events and the conferences that we would attend. And it's, about our Team Red group, for example, that is a group of people that stayed together throughout thick and thick, if you will, through the pandemic, and realized that, yeah, what happens if we don't have a conference anymore and we can't see each other? Holy cow. And we've managed to work through that and continue to be together as a group. And yeah, it's something you go back and go, what if this never happened anymore? We fixed that. We tried to fix it and we keep it going. But ask yourself that question. All those experiences that you're living are never going to be repeated. They're one-offs, and you either can regret them that they're over, or go and find something that will add to it and make a new one.
Totally. Yeah, I think we live in this fast-paced world where we're go all the time. We're never in the present moment being grateful for what we have and what we've experienced in life. So I think that's super key to being a calm, collected person, a happy person. Stressing about the past, stressing about the future is just not a healthy place to be.
It can't be. And you can sit here and dwell on the fact that, wow, I really down today and I really feel bad about not doing this or not doing that. But ask yourself what you did do. Ask yourself where you have done the proper things and focus on that. Focus on the positive. That's my glass half full kind of attitude. Has been, my glass is always full. It's not just half full. It's, if there's something in it, there's something in it. And that something is important. It doesn't have to be half, a quarter. It just has to be something. And the fact that there's something there, that is what's important. And because the alternative is there's nothing there.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned Team Red, and I think that's something that would be interesting for the listeners to hear. Just a couple of nuggets of the benefit that you got out of having this Team Red, especially during the pandemic, but moving forward, like what's that benefited you as a fire chief?
The importance of staying connected. That was the thing, where it was fun at the beginning, just for fun. Again, a lark, if you will, that a group of us who all began at a fire chiefs conference, at a national conference in Newfoundland. And we were given bandanas as a different to identify what group we were with, to go from pub to pub in a social setting, and culminating in a large event at the end. Me being the rabble rouser, if you will, the organizer, the coordinator, said, we got to get this team. Come on, let's get, everything's red. And we were taunting the other teams and getting some rivalry happening. And so when it was all over, all said and done, I said to one of our friends, I said, we should keep this going. It's bandana. I've still got the original one that we had. Let's take it back to another conference. Let's show up together as our gang and show up and do our things together, and go somewhere in the world take a photograph, have it in the background, have this thing show up on a cruise ship going to Hawaii, have it show up in Mexico, have it show up on a holiday somewhere in the world. Let's just do this for fun. And that's what it started as. Then, again, the pandemic, we'll see you next year. What happens if we don't see you next year? Then the pandemic came around, and the group of us started to get together. Let's find a new way. And then the pandemic brought us this online stuff that we were able to intermingle and chat and visit with each other, that we started to do to get together, celebrating New Year's Eve. And it was New Year's Eve on the west coast of Canada at 7:30 when you were in Newfoundland time. So we'd get together at 7:30 in the evening Pacific and have a toast and celebrate the new year, and do it across Canada with everybody that was in our group of people, about seven or eight of us. And the core group that started to just always, let's get together again next week. Let's just chat next week. And for the last 2 years plus, we've been gathering up for the most part every week on a video call and staying in touch. And the things that we've talked about, the things that have come under the bridge, from separations to cancer diagnoses to you name it, things that have gone through mentally and physically with these people that we've all worked out and through together. It's remarkable. And we've taken this on the road, actually. We went to Nova Scotia, and did a presentation at the Maritime Fire Chiefs Conference on this very topic. Sat there, did 45 plus minutes or more, and talking about our journey and who we all were from across Canada and what it meant to stay together. And then talked about and got people to recognize that's what they need to do, is form their own group and stay in touch with their own group. We did that at the Canadian Fire Chiefs in Ottawa as well the same year, and did the presentation. There wasn't a dry eye in the house, so to speak, as they say, and using the theater term. It was remarkable. And the message that people are recognizing, going, wow, it's pretty homegrown, it's pretty non-clinical, peer-to-peer counseling, if you will, but it is certainly just homegrown, talking to each other with a background, or I guess we are together in terms of what we have in common. From being fire chiefs or fire related. Nobody knows a fire chief like another fire chief. We go through a lot of different things, and it's very difficult. I think this is the whole retirement discussion, when now I'm realizing that when you, with all due respect, work in a job, when you go to work as an employee of a company and you retire, you leave that company and just don't do it anymore. But if you have responsibilities, if you have certain things that you have to do and people to care for and lives to be responsible for, all of a sudden you don't have to be. It's a different feeling. It's a freeing feeling. It's freeing because you have put someone in the position now to take that responsibility, and you're very confident and fully aware that they have the ability to do that, and you can let it go. And that's the big difference. When people say you're retired, that's great. There's something different about retiring from a fire chief's position. It's different than being in a career, larger department, I think. When you're the smaller one, when you're the only person that is employed there, that is all of a sudden now who's going to hand over, who's going to take this from you, and who's going to carry that torch, if you will. That's leave them wanting more. That is the mentality or the thought process around it's the right time. Know when it's the right time to hand over the torch and be comfortable doing so. I'm still a member of the fire department as a paid on call person. I'm a cold zone kind of person. I don't want to be at certain incidents where I'm perceived to have people look at me to be in charge, because that's not my role. But I'm a supporter. I'm doing things behind the scenes. I am doing routine administrative stuff for the volunteer department, as it were. Now that's where I'm at, and that's fine by me.
I think it's powerful to have that mindset of allowing the next generation to come in, not holding on to anything, that passion that you had is not lingering still, holding the fire department back. So it'd be interesting, when did you start contemplating retirement, and what did you put in place to make that transition happen?
It, for me, it was based on the fortunate fact that we have a pension plan, right, in the fire service as a municipal employee. And I took a look at the numbers, and the number that said, here's the age that you can retire. Our original bylaw, which is still in place, which is in the process of being renewed and changed, originally said you couldn't be a member of the fire department after the age of 60. Times have changed, and putting those kind of rules in place are really not legally allowed anymore, I don't think. And at the end of the day, that was a magic number to me. It was hopefully we're in a position to hand it over. How is it going to get handed over? But when you see someone, like in our case, who came up as an opportunity, that you're going to recognize that this person, these people that we're putting in place now to follow, they may not be here if you hang on. If you say, I'm going to stay here right to the bitter end, and I'm going to stay into this position, that's not fair. That's, to me, not fair. And that magic number was the push that said, it's the right time. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not an accountant by any means. But at the end of the day, here is that time where the backpack is starting to get full, and that would be the right time. It was putting things in a position from there on in. I go back to 2021 when we were able to hire a deputy, and that was a big thing. Hiring another person in the fire department was, wow, like really? But it was pushed as a succession plan. Right. You need to have the right person in the position in a small volunteer fire department. And again, with all due respect to my colleagues, hiring a retired firefighter from a large city department to become the fire chief in your community would probably not go over well. I would think that a lot of the fire guys and girls would say, I'm not staying around for this. This person's coming in with ideas that are going to be different. It's going to change, and I don't like change. Again, that's my opinion. So if we can groom from within, train the people along the way to our best of our abilities, and get them the proper training to put them in a position, there's that word again, that term, put them in a position to take a job if it becomes available. And it did. And now we've put that person in a position. We've always said in the fire department, I use the term all the time, that we're a farm team now. That's all we are. We seem to be the farm team. And we were always afraid of that. We are always worried that we overtrain these people, they're going to go work for a career department. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. Let's train them to the best we can train these people. And if they're picked up by another department, that's validation for what we do. And the public that we serve, look at the people, the good people that we had in place that were moving on. And the next ones coming up will also see that and realize that this may be a stepping stone for me to make a career out of this and start in a small town and get that recognition from the career fire service, which we've done. So having people in place that are willing and able to step up, the time was right. And if you see the time is right, don't lose it, because at the end of the day, I've seen people lose it. I've seen people miss opportunities for whatever reason. And it might be looked upon as being selfish to a point where you just don't let go. At the end of the day, knowing when to say when, leave them wanting more and never overstay your welcome. That will always be the best. And again, personally, my parents never had a chance to retire. I wanted to see what that was like. I wanted to get that chance. And if you can, you need to. And it was when I learned about, through the mental wellness training that we've done over the years, when I first heard the term compassion fatigue. I'd never heard of that. My wife was a nurse. She retired a few years ago as a nurse. That's what she faced all the time was, and you and I have had this discussion years ago,
For sure.
and it's all right to not want to deal with people anymore. You can say that. We can say that. Like I said, you said to me, and we both said, I'm tired of dealing with people, the needy people that always, every time you turn around, they want something. Is it all right to say I'm tired of that? Yeah.
Our bucket's only so full. Our capacity is only so much.
And again, opportunity. And it's a challenge. Retirement, I won't lie, it's not the same in terms of going and the paycheck's different, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's also not the same, which is the reason why when I did the ceremonial in my house, turning off of the pager was a huge deal. That when people don't understand, and that's the whole back to the Team Red concept, that when I can have this conversation with this group and they understand and the heads are nodding going, yeah, we get it. But the general public doesn't get it. When you say that I'm on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that's impossible. No, it's not impossible. You're always connected. You may not always be able to respond to a call, but you know when it's happening, when your phone buzzes and when the app goes off. And you could be on holidays on a beach in Mexico if you're so fortunate to have that opportunity, and you have cell service. There's a call, there's a structure fire, something was going on, or you're getting a text from somebody going, yeah, everything's okay, this is what's happened, or you're reading news items. You're always responsible. And when I was off for a while on vacation before I officially retired, but I was still on. I'd never in 23 years been able to take a vacation. And yeah, you say, I'm off on holidays. You don't turn off. You don't shut it down. You don't say, I don't care. You can't, because you are ultimately responsible because you're at the top. And that is when you're standing on the heap. Yeah, there's still something pushing down on you, but maybe it's the pulling that's pulling down on you that doesn't weigh you down, but keeps you grounded and pulls, and they're always grabbing at you. It was that moment when I said, I don't do that anymore. And how many times throughout a days have I said to myself, I catch myself thinking of something and going, what happens? And I stop and I say, that's not my responsibility anymore.
Yeah.
And
say that's so freeing, isn't it? So freeing.
It is totally. It's a different, and again, that's celebrate it. I feel guilty sometimes. And I go back to, I told somebody, it was the old, what's the year now? 19, I want to say 30s. When was the movie Scrooge was on the Christmas Carol, the black and white version with Alistair Sims is the character of Scrooge. And he gets up in the morning after meeting all the ghosts of the Christmases before and future. And he gets up and he goes, I can't feel bad for being so happy. And then, and that's the feeling I keep getting is that I feel bad for being so happy. But that's okay. And at the end of the day, life, again, going back to the fact that life is short. And for my parents that never got a chance to retire, never saw that time to do whatever you want. Someone, first thing I said to me said, what are you going to do now that you're retired? I said, whatever makes me feel good. And this conversation right now is filling that
Awesome.
Thank you.
I'm very proud that you recognize that in yourself and that timing. And like you said, there's so many chiefs that put in the extra month, extra year. And unfortunately, when they finally retire, quite often, more often than not, they pass away because they're so connected to their job. Their job is them.
I find,
I think
go
it's
ahead.
important to have that self-identity outside of the fire service. Do you agree with that?
I think in a small town, what's really different is that when you're the fire chief, if I'm the fire chief in a large city in Canada, they'll know me through the news, they'll know me to a point, but at the end of the day, the average person on the street may not know who I am. In a small town, everybody does. Be it on duty or off, they know who you are. And that's the part of me that goes back to the old performance days of being this person who's out there, that I was out there, and that was a radio thing. And that's where people, maybe to my detriment, maybe to my benefit, but at the end of the day, I haven't changed, and I'm still doing that. I'm still taking part in community events and having some fun and being public. And then maybe that's people that didn't know that's the fire chief. You shouldn't be the fire chief. That you have to be this old person that is respected and doesn't do anything but doesn't go to a fire, doesn't do anything. Wait a second here. This is a different role in a smaller community where you're the only paid person in the fire department. Sometimes during the day when you have to have the courage to tell the public that times are tough in the fire service, that the volunteers aren't available, that at this very moment, I would say at any given day, that there are two of us in town. And does that concern you? How do we keep them in town? So and again, learning that aspect, biggest things I ever learned was how to deal with councils, how to deal with the public, where I was afraid at the beginning that I had to justify and everything was going to be perfect because you hired me and, oh, don't worry about things are good. But then when I actually had the courage and the knowledge, knowing what I know now, if I knew back then, might have got me in trouble. But I learned over the years that as I got more confident in what I knew and what I was able to talk about, that I could physically, mentally, and be able to go to the public and say, I feel good about telling you that the volunteer fire service right now is in trouble nationwide. And you need to know this is affecting our community. So yeah, unless you, the public, want to make changes, you can criticize, you could fire all the people. You don't have to have a paid fire chief. But at the end of the day, what level of fire safety and protection do you want for your community? And so that was the kind of being out there and being able to back up what you do. And I got that confidence over time. And I'm glad I did, because if I was a 5-year fire chief, was the rule I was told, that you're only a fire chief for the last 5 years of your career. My only career, other than radio broadcasting and sales in those businesses, was being a fire chief. And I mentioned to you that when I first got the gig, so to speak, and it was embarrassing. I didn't feel appropriate being a firefighter. Like, I was a volunteer. And now today we tell people, there's no such thing as just a volunteer. You're a firefighter. You are part of the family, no matter what size, what town, what community. You are a member of the fire service. And we didn't have that built into us back in the day. And that's unfortunate. And that's one of the keys we bring in the moment we bring people into the fire department is your life is about to change. Whereas you were brought in, you were lucky to be a member. You were lucky because you were voted into the fire department. You were brought in as a candidate and a member of a fraternity almost. And when you got hired, I got hired. The message that I was told, you were lucky to have a job. Just don't make waves. You're lucky to be here. Yeah, I felt lucky, but at the end of the day, it should have been something that was created long ago. And again, I was the first. And the new guys coming in today, fast track, is the fact that we have 2 people right off the hop. And the fire chief we brought up, we put in place another potential to have a succession plan in place. And we were fortunate to do that and had the budget ability to continue that position. And now that position's in place. So we have the fire chief and the deputy, which again is a accomplishment. I'm going, that's all right. That's the legacy, right, that I've left behind. Yes. No one outside the fire department cheering that. They don't know. Just assume that, well, we got a couple fire people. And when I phone 911, someone's going to come.
Yeah, it's an accomplishment, but it's also a smart move. Succession planning, I think, is so key to a successful organization. And if you're dropping the ball there, it's not going to be a long-term success. So I think that's a smart move versus just a pat on the back. It's smart.
I've always, part of my significance of leaving, I try and find something significant in everything I do, and I go back on significance, but I don't, it really wasn't important to me to hit a certain years of service. Yeah, the age, one thing was something just because of the finances, so to speak, or the pension. Yeah, it's a magic number. Take it. It's there for you. You've earned it. What are you hanging on for? I go back and say, okay, 1983, I joined. I took technically 5 years off away from the fire department when I worked in Vancouver. I was still socially connected to the group, but I wasn't going to practices and such and on call when I got in town. But at the end of the day, I wasn't technically a valid member until I moved back to town and joined the other fire department in the neighborhood and got back in the fire service. Of 83, we're talking 40 years with 5 years in between. It's kind of broken service, 35 years in the fire service, and getting out at being a chief, not exactly 23 years, but just over 22. It, to me, there was no significance to that. I didn't see it. It didn't hit a certain number. I'm waiting to my 25. I'm waiting to this. No, I'm not. The time is right. And this opportunity is going to be missed because the people we have in place locally to take on this position are ready now. We need to put them in now. And my opportunity is here and I can take that now. It's no sacrifice to me, but hanging on is not helping anybody. And so in the interest of the community, in the interest of the fire service and in our community, the time was right. Yeah, when I first got a hockey jersey when I was a kid, and I just realized this the other day, the first ever hockey jersey that I got, being a hockey fan, was a Mike Bossy jersey. That was the only one available in the store, and it was actually just a jersey of the New York Islanders, and I didn't know any players on that team other than Mike Bossy, so I thought, I got to get a Mike Bossy, and his number was 22. And that was the jersey number I had on the back with my name on the back. So at the end of the day, I go, there's a reason, and find that reason, because you don't have to chase significance. You got to go back and see why something was significant.
Yeah. So funny you say that, because my favorite player was Michael Jordan, number 23. My seniority number at the Salt Spring Fire was 23 for my whole career. And I actually went on my stress leave on the 23rd year. None of this was obviously planned. And I didn't make my 25 either. And that doesn't bother me whatsoever.
No,
I put in my service and I'm happy.
At the end of the day, it's, yeah, you get the recognition that you get from yourself. And that's important because you really have no one else to impress but yourself. Yep. And if you're happy, then that's what makes you smile. And remember that. And yeah, it's, people don't have to know. At the end of the day, it's not about doing this, doing that, but you can go back. And like I said, if my dad was around as a fire person, it was funny because you and I had the opportunity to meet Randolph Mantooth. Hero growing up in the fire service was Emergency, the TV show. And in a small community, we didn't get a lot of TV channels back in the day. We got 2. Yeah. And maybe 3 if we were lucky on a good day, if I was outside turning the antenna in the right direction. But one of them, TV station from Bellingham, Washington. And that was where we got Emergency. And my dad was in the fire department, and I was a young kid watching the show, and I was going, oh, this is great. And he was, God, it's terrible. These guys don't know what they're doing. This is that wouldn't happen. That wouldn't happen. But when we had the opportunity to meet Randy and have him up for a conference in BC, that was cool. And that was really something to go back. And that goes back to when I realized the significance of that meeting, going, I always wanted to do this in some way, shape, or form. I always wanted to. I had my little bike with the light on the handlebars, and I had a siren. I wanted to be something in that kind of realm. It was funny being on the radio station, being a news reporter, because in small town fire, small town police, small town radio, you do everything. You do it all. There's not special divisions that you could be the morning host, you could be doing advertising, writing advertising copy, you could be selling the advertising, you could be doing the commercials, you'd be doing the morning show, and then you'd be doing news stories, because when there's an event in your community, you got to be on the air, get a little tape recorder and feed a story down to the main station or even into Vancouver, where our news was sent to sometimes. So large events, we're doing the coverage. But I was doing fire coverage and I was a firefighter. I was on the team. So a fire was a big thing because we didn't go on very many calls. It was a small town, but to get a fire, that was a huge deal. And there'd be times I'd have a pager on the air and hear a call come in and can't leave because I'm on the radio and I can't put on a long song and just leave. You'd hear the calls and you try and tune it away, but then I'd follow up and I'd be at the fire hall doing a report on, yes, the fire department responded to this fire. There were no injuries to report. The standard issue report of a house fire. But then you hear the truck beeping, backing into the fire hall while I'm recording the story, taking off one hat and putting on another.
Yeah.
But again, that was small town fun stuff. And so you have to look back on that with good memories, because not a lot of people in our business, in the fire business, can say they did that, can say that they interviewed people on the radio, that they did. I did a music program. I was part of a team that we did a show called Country Coast to Coast. We were on the air midnight Pacific time in Vancouver, across Canada. I've presented, and when I look, they would have a map on the wall on our satellite map that showed the stations we were in, the cities we were in. I was one of the all-night guys in Edmonton, and Calgary, and Montreal, and Gander, Newfoundland. I did a presentation in Gander, Newfoundland one time at a conference and said, I was your all-night radio guy here in 1992. And it's what? But it was a radio station or a satellite feed that we didn't tell people that we were actually from Vancouver. We were just acting like we were in your town, and all the tapes and all the stuff, all the technology was there. So pretty cutting edge back in the day is what it was.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, it was neat.
I think our listeners are definitely going to get with a lot of your stories and a lot of your, and I hope learn some nuggets from your mindset of how to progress and lead through your journey as a fire chief in a small town. I think there's lots of nuggets there for our listeners. And I want to ask a question at the end here what's one message that you want the Canadian Fire Service to hear that can make us just a little bit better?
The message, I think there's many messages. The Canadian Fire Service needs to understand that you're not alone, that in the end, you may feel like it, but the family that you have is far reaching. And I think most people know that. If those that are involved for some time, you understand family. And that's one of the hard things of leaving the fire service in terms of retirement, is you may feel like you're leaving the family. You're not. I'm still connected to the family. I'm still connected nationally, provincially. You'll always have that family connection in the fire service. But it's going to be a challenge in the coming years, especially from the volunteer side. But know the fact that no matter what happens, you make a difference every day. And people and kids in particular will still look up to you and still look up to a firefighter no matter what you go through. When you join the fire service, here's your welcome to the department. We are going to train you as of tomorrow, that you are now a hero to kids. And that's huge. That's huge when you say that all of a sudden, here's your cape and you're now going to be part of this team. When does that happen? When do you get that? When you leave civilian life to become a member of the fire department, and how do you go the opposite way? So yeah, the message is recognize what you do, recognize the significance of what you do. It may only be for yourself, but at the end of the day, that's what's important.
Right. The word connection keeps coming to mind. You mentioned it a few times in the podcast of staying connected and being in a retirement phase. That's probably a challenge for some, but you make a great point of the fire service family nationwide, worldwide, is still there once you retire. Just a little bit different, right? So
just a bit different. Again, recognize your role as a firefighter, your role as an officer, your role maybe as a fire chief, and as a retired fire chief. Some people say, oh, it's all over now. No, it's not. The general public may think that, oh, you don't have to wear a uniform anymore. I still can. I still officially have a retired uniform, and still you will always be a fire chief. I will always be a fire chief, albeit retired. That's going to be with me forever. That's the pride thing that I have. That's something I earned. And while it was thrust upon me, I kind of angled my way into it, so to speak, that some might think it felt that way at the beginning, that you forced your way into the position. But where it is now, where the fire department locally is now, that those that were in my position 25 years ago would say, wow, this is different. It's a different world. It's a different time. And thank you for setting that up and putting it in a position that we can rely upon it, because you never knew the duck was on the water, but you never saw the feet that were paddling below. And so people still see the duck, and it's still calm waters for the most part. But at the end of the day, those feet are furiously paddling away in all different directions in different ways. So yeah, you'll always have a connection. You just have a different place in it, and recognize that, understand that, and be proud of it. Be proud of the fact that whatever you've done. I've always said that, and we face this in the Fire Chiefs Association, there is a retired group of fire chiefs. We are retired fire chiefs in our provincial association. But volunteer fire chiefs that retire are still working people. They're not retired in life, but they're not part of that association. Something maybe you should be. Maybe you should be, as a volunteer, former volunteer fire chief that has retired from that position, but may still be working or doing something. You don't consider yourself retired. Yeah, but you're a retired fire chief. And that's something to be proud of. And I don't think you want to lose that. I think you want to try and maintain that and make that position in your mind, because it's something you will always have.
Yeah, great point. Chief, it's been a great conversation. I'm sure our listeners will get lots of little nuggets out of there, and those that are just approaching retirement will probably really resonate with what you're saying. We've known each other for over a decade now, so it's been a real honor to know you as a friend, a colleague, and I look forward to hearing more about your story. And be sure to check out your podcast as well that's on Firefighting Canada, because you cover a lot of leaders across Canada as well. So just want to appreciate that, and thank you for the time, and you stay well.
Appreciate that. And thanks to you as well. And I'm glad to say, staying in touch. This is how we do it. Relationships are important. And I'm glad that you and I have had one for years.
Yes. All right. All the best. Stay well.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.